On today's Rising to the Top Lessons in Leadership podcast, we're very excited to have with us today Jarrett Krosoczka, known since boyhood as JJK, is a New York Times bestselling author, illustrator behind more than 40 books for young readers, including his wildly popular Lunch Lady graphic novels, select volumes of the Star Wars Jedi Academy series, and Hey Kiddo, which was a National Book Award finalist. Krosoczka creates books with humor, heart, and deep respect for his young readers, qualities that have made his titles perennial favorites on the bookshelves of homes, libraries, and bookstores over the past 20 years. Jarrett lives in Western Massachusetts with his spouse, their 3 children, pugs Ralph and Frank, and a French bulldog named Bella Carmela. Thanks for being here with us today, Jarrett.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to see you, man.
So today I wanted to have a conversation with you around the theme of creativity, as someone whose career is based on that. You're a maker, you're a creator, you imagine things and you bring them to life on the page and then into the world. What does creativity mean to you?
I mean, essentially creativity is, making something out of nothing and finding ways around obstacles, there's, creativity is just trying to maybe see the world in a different way. And so for me, that comes through writing and illustrating books. It comes through in, the video content that I make, which was spurred on by problem solving, right? Because COVID hit and I could no longer book tour. I could no longer go into schools and libraries. And so I immediately pivoted to create video content and, with every passing week, trying to figure out how I could improve the production and the sound and the light and everything like that to make it a more robust program. So it's a long-winded way of what creativity means for me.
That's great. And I like how you talked about how you had to pivot. That's something that our students at Columbia definitely had to do, as did all of us that have been impacted by the pandemic. So it's really important to be able to pivot and to do different things. I was wondering, Jarrett, if you could sketch a little for us, like while we're talking, if like any ideas came up in your head, it'd be a really nice addition for people that are watching the video. They'll be able to see.
Yeah, for sure.
So as far as the topic of creativity, this is something that obviously is very important to the work that you do as a writer and as an illustrator. Can you talk about how people can bring some of this creativity into their daily work? People whose work might be mundane or repetitive. Like, do you have any suggestions on that?
I think that regardless of what a young person grows up to do, they, at the core, they're going to need to be creative problem solvers, because in many cases too, like the jobs our kids will have someday have not even been invented yet. Even by nature of what we're doing here now, where you are interviewing me via video and for a podcast, and then there's an audio engineer making sure everything goes right. Like these jobs did not exist when we were kids. And so that doesn't necessarily answer your question, but that your question made me think of that philosophy I have on that. Well, you don't need to be a drafts person to draw. You don't just putting marks on a page. I mean, that in itself is very therapeutic. Even if you're just making abstract marks or patterns, it's centering. It's like a form of meditation. And it's very important to be bored. It's important to our mental health. It's important to our creative output too. And it's really hard to be bored, because at any point we can consume short form videos and news and so many things. And it kind of just becomes like a weird tick where our thumbs just like go on our phone and just like look for things. And so this is a good way to keep your hands busy while you're not just getting inundated with dopamine or conversely rage.
Can you talk a little bit about, because you mentioned this idea of mental health, and I think it's something that obviously that was important to everybody prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has put more of a focus on it as we've been faced with more challenges and illness and stress. How do you take care of yourself? What are your self care routines like? And does it lead back to some of what you were saying? Like, is this therapeutic for you now, even though it's also your calling?
Yes and no. I mean, what's tricky is when it also becomes your vocation. You have to remember to just make marks just to make marks, right? And so one of the things that I love to do is I love to draw people. Like here, I'm just doing a quick little sketch of you. I especially love, people watching. Like I love like either being at an airport or being at a cafe somewhere and just watching people and observing people walk by. Um, Here, I'm gonna grab one of my old sketchbooks here. 1 second. Let's see what I can find for you. Okay, so this is an old sketchbook of I was a dad at this point, so when my kids were much younger, and just stopping to take a sketchbook and drawing what I see around me. And when you take time to sketch what you see before you, you really observe and take in the information that's there. You're not just snapping a photo to then later maybe put a filter on and post to social media. So, we're surrounded by so many different subjects, whether it be family and friends or strangers at an airport. And so that centers me. Other than that, you know, um, like so many people did too, just hit a total brick wall during the pandemic when I realized I was trying to do everything and I was not taking care of myself. And so allowing myself to just lay on the couch and veg out, allowing myself to just do absolutely nothing, whether it be read a book or sometimes too you know, to just grab something like TikTok and disassociate for like 30 minutes and just go and watch videos. I mean, my wife and I have a saying that, Facebook will make you hate everyone you've ever known, but TikTok will make you fall in love with people you'll never meet. Um, and so just really allowing myself to be like, yeah, I'm late on my book deadlines. And I can do that a little bit more now because I'm established. I've proven myself. Um, so it's like that thing where Neil Gaiman said um, at a graduation. He said, if you want to be successful in a creative field, you need one of three things. You need to be good. I mean, you need two of these. You need to be good. You need to be nice, and you need to be prompt. And like, if you could have just two of these three things, you'll succeed. And I got those two going for me. And so that's where I'm at. That's where I allow myself the self care.
I was wondering, Jared, can you talk about what it is as far as writing and drawing, illustrating? What does that do for you? Is it a way for you to express yourself? Is it a way for you to share what's going on in your head? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I mean, when I was a young person coming up, like I was raised by my grandparents, and that generation did not believe in therapy or anything like that. And I had a challenging childhood. My mother was incarcerated because she was addicted to heroin, and I didn't know who my father was. I didn't meet him until I was 17. And and so I had my sketchbooks, and so back then I would use my sketchbooks to just process and draw what I was feeling. I don't do that as much anymore. I do speak to a therapist, and I guess in some ways too, I deal with things in my past because I do write about my own life in the past. Um, and so and it's tricky for me too because ultimately I have to get these drawings done if I want to pay my electric bill, right? And if I want to make sure that I'm putting food on the table. So it is when it becomes your vocation, it is a mix of pressure, but also it's like this is what I've always loved to do ever since I was a kid.
So to touch upon, you started talking about your childhood, and there's obviously you're very resilient, and I was wondering, where does your resiliency come from as someone who's chosen to build their own career, and in part because you could have easily given up along the way because of these struggles that you faced as a kid, and I don't think anyone would have faulted you if that was the case, and then you decided to choose a profession where you really had to be your own advocate, you really had to hustle. Where does that resiliency come from?
I mean, it's kind of like all I ever wanted to do, right? So it's like failure wasn't an option. Part of it too is, my mother was a very talented artist, and the majority of my correspondence with her as a kid came through physical mail and letters that she would write to me while she was incarcerated. And she would send me artwork she would make. Like, she would draw me a picture, and then I would draw her a cartoon character back. And I could see how talented she was, but how she was never really able to do anything with that talent because of the disease of addiction that she had. And so I decided very early on as a young person that, like, I was going to do something with these skills that I had. I also, for me, being raised by my grandparents who grew up during the Great Depression, they were very nervous about sending their kid to art school. And so I wanted to make sure that I could prove to them and they could see in their lifetime that I was going to be successful and this was all going to work out. And it's a mix of being super optimistic, like sometimes naively optimistic, but also very pragmatic as well.
You mentioned that you wanted your grandparents to see your success. Were they able to see that in their lifetime?
They were, yeah, no, they were there for. My grandmother was alive for the first 5 years of being published, and my grandfather for the first seven. So they saw that first book published. They saw several other books published after that.
That's amazing. They must have been so proud.
They were very proud. Yes, they were.
So, Jared, if you could talk about the fact that a really big part of your work has become giving presentations, whether it's in front of small children. I know you do sometimes, you'll do like high school tours, you're doing book tours, you're in front of a lot of people, and you also have done TED Talks where you're in front of large audiences. How did you get to the point where you feel comfortable and confident speaking in front of a large audience? And do you have any advice that you could share with people that find that challenging?
I used to be terrified of public speaking. Like, I vividly remember running for class office in high school, and I had to get up in front of the class, the entire graduating class of whatever, 95, when I was a sophomore in high school. And I remember so nervous. I was holding my speech, and the paper was shaking, and it was an audible, like, you could hear it shaking. And I remember someone being like, "Oh, you can look at, he's shaking." And even when I was in college, in art school, when it became my time for critique, I would I would just be terrified to speak in front of a group of 16 of my peers in whatever class. And so there are two things that really helped me overcome that. One was working at a camp and being working in front of kids, right? Because it's one thing to speak in front of your peers, but then to speak in front of a group of kids, it's a lot easier. And also acting classes and understanding um, how to project, how to hold your body on the stage, and all of those things, and then just by doing. So when my first book was published, I started giving presentations, and just for friends, just for the fun of it, just get some practice. And so you quickly learn, like, what works and what doesn't work. And so for 21 years now, I have been fine tuning this author presentation. And so you mentioned the TED Talk. That was initially given quite by accident. I was a last minute replacement. It was a TEDx talk happening in the neighboring town. I got to call it noon for an event that started at 4. And so I didn't have time to be nervous because I was really just shooting by the hip. And sometimes I find that the more time you have, the more you overthink things, and the less fresh and the more nervous you might be, especially when it's a new talk. And I gave the second TED talk I was very nervous because then you have that feeling of, what if this isn't as good as the first one? What if people don't respond to it? What if it doesn't make it to the website? And so I was nervous. And I called a friend who's got nothing to do with books or public speaking and publishing, and he said something that really gave me radical acceptance that I think about every single time I jump on stage. Is like, I have nothing to lose. Like, if this, I have nothing to lose. Nothing is being taken away from my life if whatever talk doesn't go the way that I'd hoped it would. And so, if you're giving a talk, know the talk so well. Like, I've learned that I don't do a good. I can't give a speech, right? Like, I can't write a speech and then read it, but I can write bullet points of all of my thoughts and use those bullet points to hit whatever notes. Um, I also, because I tell stories with words and pictures, I always have slides or visuals. And when you're writing a book that's illustrated, the words and pictures each tell a different part of the story. They don't repeat one another. They don't contradict one another, but they don't tell you the exact same thing. And I take that approach with my slides as well. So no one wants to read a slide. And so I never like have what I'm saying written on the slide. I'm going to have a visual that complements what I'm saying.
That was Baghead, right? And the previous one was
Monkey Boy, which was 2001, and that's Baghead, which was published in
nice.
2002.
And I saw before you had Yoda too.
Yes, that's right. I did some books for Lucasfilm as well.
That's awesome. You seem to make yourself available, whether it's to kids that are interested in drawing or children's books or writing, or to adults, or you seem to have like this open door policy where, if people are genuine with you, you're willing to open yourself up to them and connect. I'd like for you to talk for a moment or so about your new book that's going to be coming out. But can you talk about that willingness to be there for other people and to serve?
Well, like I feel like, especially in the world of children's books, like I'm a link in a long chain. So um, like Tommy DePaula and Mark Brown and these other sort of iconic author illustrators that I always really looked up to in their careers, and some of them I read their books as when I was a kid too. They were always super, super generous with their time. And I'll never forget the kindness that so many people like them or Jane Yolen showed me. And so like I know what it's like to be a kid, a young person who wants to create something and make something and follow a dream. Now, that being said, I have learned how to protect my time at the same way. So my mantra has been this year, like, okay, don't piss off future Jarrett. Like, don't say yes to something that future Jarrett is going to be stressed out by. So, for instance, I had a couple of podcast interviews in which the host was so ill prepared that I could see in the reflection of their glasses, they were looking at my website, and like for the first time. And they were like, "Oh, it says here on your website you gave a TED talk. What is that about?" And all I could think was like, "No, like that's something you could have done before we jumped on the call. Like, I don't want to have to pitch my TED talk to you. Like, that's not what this is about." Um, and even sometimes from people that I know really well who have a YouTube channel with a lot of followers, and to do a little thing, and I'm like, it's not going to be the best use of my time right now. Like, I have to be more careful about the yeses that I give out. And I still mentor a lot of people and encourage young authors, artists that I see online. And I just like, again, I think it goes back to the fact that I genuinely like people, and I never forget the kindness that people showed me over the years.
So I just wanted to ask you. It's a question that has two parts. As far as our Columbia students who are currently enrolled at Columbia, do you have any suggestions for how they can make the most of their time while they're a student?
There isn't much that I would go back in time and say to my younger self, because I think that my younger self needed to figure stuff out on his own. But I guess if there's one thing I might go back and say to myself, it would be, chill out a little bit in that. Like, I used to like set goals for like, oh, I want to get published by the time I'm this age, right? Like, those are things I can't control. The only thing that you should be setting goals for yourself are things that you can control. Like so for instance, for me, that was, I can control writing and illustrating, improving my craft, and submitting my work. Those are the things that I can control. I can't control someone else's opinion about my work. I can't control an editor saying, oh, we want to invest the money to publish this person's book. And so the more that you can base your goals on what you can control, the less disappointed you're going to be in life.
That's great. I think that's really helpful advice. And last thing, Jarrett, I just wanted to give you a moment to talk about what you're currently up to. And I know you have a new book coming out in the spring.
I don't have it right here. My new book, it's called Sunshine, and it's a follow-up to my first graphic memoir, which was Hey Kiddo. So like, I spent my majority of my career writing books for really young kids, preschool, and then a good chunk of my time making graphic novels for elementary school age people. And my first book for teens was called Hey Kiddo, which also had a lot of crossover appeal for adults as well. And actually now I'm touring a lot of colleges giving talks about the book. And Sunshine is about my time working at a camp for kids with pediatric cancer. And it comes out in April. And so I'm now trying to find the balance of getting back into like book tour mode as I did in the before. And how do I combine that with this new reality of, creating online content? And so just trying to find the right balance of it all. Like that's, while also somewhere in there trying to finish books too that are past due.
Well, Jarrett, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. Where can people find you?
Studio JJK on any social platform, or studiojjk.com.